Bergen-Fischer Media.
Is it possible to change things? Can I rise above the flood? Will the process cleanse my soul, or is it always in the blood?
I'd like to welcome everybody back to In the Blood. I am your host, AC Bergen-Fischer. With me today, as always, or not as always, as usually, is Jason the Dice Man Moore.
Hello, everybody.
Today, we want to explore a topic that's not only ancient, but I think relevant to our modern lives, which is mindfulness. Mindfulness is all about being present in the moment. It's about being aware of our thoughts, feelings, and surroundings without passing judgment. It's a simple concept, but I think one that can profoundly impact how we experience our daily lives. The roots of mindfulness go back thousands of years and are embedded in ancient meditation practices, particularly those found in Buddhism. And over time, these practices have been adapted into modern secular approaches that are accessible to people from all walks of life, regardless of religious or spiritual beliefs. So you might be asking why we're talking about mindfulness today. And it's because in our fast-paced and stress-filled worlds, mindfulness can offer a way to slow down, reconnect with ourselves, and find a sense of peace amidst the chaos. And with the growing awareness of mental health challenges, mindfulness has become more popular and necessary than ever. It provides a tool to help manage stress, improve well-being, and cultivate a deeper sense of presence in our lives. So today we want to get a little bit deeper into what mindfulness is, where it comes from, and how it can be a valuable part of everyday life. So I think that's been enough rambling. I will allow Jay to get us started, and I will shut up.
Oh, mindfulness. What a very deep topic this can get into. This can become quite the rabbit hole. We've got a lot of what people think is mindfulness. We've got a lot of what mindfulness really is. And I think we've got a lot of people who try to incorporate it individually, not as a collective. And in my opinion, that's where I think things start to go wrong, because people are no longer working together. They're working for me. So hopefully throughout our journey of mindfulness this season, and just making a side note that though this season is themed around mindfulness, it doesn't necessarily mean that every single episode is going to be bullet holing and punching mindfulness down the throats of people. We're going to talk about everything we want to talk about. We're going to talk about different situations, but there's going to be a mindfulness theme throughout it, so people can learn to take notice or look at it and say, oh, I already do that. Excellent. I can expand on that by blah, blah, blah.
No, fair enough. I like that you actually clarified that, because, yeah, as much as the listeners may not be super thrilled if we were just going to focus entirely on mindfulness, I don't think I, as a co-host, would be terribly thrilled if we were going to lock ourselves totally in there either. So, is there any place in particular you wanted to jump off with?
Well, I've always been fascinated by the benefits and or lack thereof of mindfulness. How some people think that, I'm going to be mindful, which means they think about it for 7.5 seconds, and then, I thought about it, that was me being mindful, and go on. And then people who also put it into practice and are mindful actually change the shit they're trying to put together. Two opposite ends of the scale. Like, how do we bring those opposite ends of the scale as a race together? And I mean the human race.
Right. No, I think we were chatting about it a little bit before we started recording. I mean, even like the idea of like what mindfulness even is. I mean, I don't know about you, but how I define it, it really varies day to day. Like, sometimes according to my mood, my situation, my need for mindfulness exercises often will define how I'm will define how I define it. That's like really redundant.
Yeah.
It will inform how I define it based on the demands of the situation. And again, like the benefits or the detriments, those also are going to change day to day. But maybe instead of starting off with the detriments, I mean, I know one of the big benefits for me has just been stress reduction.
Does it more so cause reduction in stress over time because you're practicing it, or is it immediate, or what do you find more presentable in your situation?
Well, it's a combination of things. I think it's primarily part of my preventative care and maintenance rituals. Like I'll start off with some basic breathing and meditation exercises in the morning, and I will take a morning walk when the weather conditions are appropriate. At some point in my walk, I'll take off my socks and shoes and just make sure that my feet are touching the grass. Just to sort of, for me, it's a sensory thing. It helps me connect with my environment and disconnect from the negative, nagging parts of my headspace. Allows me to have more of an, I was about to say an unfiltered connection with my headspace, but I think actually it's more filtered, if anything. I'm filtering out all the nonsense
Fair enough.
and allowing myself to just immerse in the purest version of me. Which in the end has the effect of me not getting into these stressful frames of mind.
Well, and maybe on a superficial level, also being mindful of where you're stepping, so you don't literally step in it.
Well, you know what? Like, I hadn't even actually thought about that before.
I know it sounds funny, but I'm being very serious, actually.
No, I know. And like, the listeners don't get to see the look on your face. I mean, I know you're not joking, though it sounds very tongue in cheek, but that really is kind of a metaphor for life, right? Because I mean, we do need to be careful where we're stepping and what we're stepping in and who we're stepping with.
And sometimes we do have to take off our socks and shoes and just feel the grass and enjoy the connection.
Right.
That was kind of cool. Yeah.
Okay.
Look at that. We're blowing our own minds. Holy mackerel. What do you find it does for your anxiety and your depression?
I think because of the type of mindfulness practices I engage in, because it starts off with that meditative element, again, it allows me to sidestep a good degree of the anxiety and the depression. I've had conversations with people saying, well, I don't really meditate. I don't know how to meditate, or I don't believe in meditation. Just any number of reasons why people will say that meditation is not for them.
Right.
I like to speak primarily to the point they make, saying, well, I don't know how to meditate. I always fire back immediately with, well, do you know how to worry? And of course, everybody knows how to worry. And all worrying is, by my definition, would be meditating on the negative. So by meditating on the positive or the neutral, or just meditating on the different, meditating on the external, noticing these things, absorbing them, immersing myself in them, I don't have as much headspace left for the feedback loop that causes the anxiety and the depression.
Okay, fair enough.
Something as benign as listening to the wind rustling through the leaves, listening to the birds chirp, feeding a freaking squirrel. These are all things that are really, really good for me. And I would imagine similar types of things would have similar types of benefits for others. I mean, I know through talking to you, or I should say, I would assume through talking to you that your simple practice of walking your dog and spending time with him in some ways is a mindfulness exercise that is good for your anxiety and depressive elements.
Well, for me, it does reduce stress, but in kind of a different way. Like I do some simple things similar to what you did. Like the other morning, we went for a walk at 6:30 in the morning. It was raining. It was an actual thunderstorm here, which I love. And Tobias and I went for a walk, and we ended up sitting. I got like wet ass from sitting on the wet grass, and just watched and absorbed the thunderstorm and took in the elements around us and appreciated the fact that we could be here to do this. And me taking appreciation that I could do it with him. It was kind of cool. But where reducing my stress comes in, it's more so putting it into practice. because as you know, I run fairly hot most of the time. I'm fairly consistently going.
Right.
New businesses, working, making arrangements to get new things and sell old things, and something's always going on in my side. So putting into practice mindfulness, where I actually take a moment and spend some time with my partner, take them both out, and my partner and Tobias, and let them do things out in a park, making sure I put my ducks in a row before I do something. For me, that's my mindfulness. That's me. That's how I reduce my stress. I have a really hard time walking outside without my socks and shoes on. Metaphorically, I understand it, and I do it in a different way. And through the practice, how I view mindfulness and the way I set it up, that reduces my stresses and my anxieties, because I don't have 1,800 things going on. I've only got 1,300 because my ducks are in a row, and I can handle the 1,300. Well,
right.
That's an exaggeration, but.
No, and I don't know if it's a conscious thing for you or if it's subconscious, but I mean, like, I understand your sensory issues are different than mine. So, I mean, the idea of bare feet on the ground are it's kind of distasteful or off-putting to you. But I've noticed that the last time I was in the same city with you, we went out for a walk. I noticed that you put your hand on things and felt the warmth of the sun that had been absorbed into these things fairly frequently along the way. I could see you were taking all these 2 and 3 second pauses just to enjoy the sensory thing of your hand on things.
Yep. Or appreciating the visual aspect of like a raindrop on a handrail or something. Right. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I never put that down to mindfulness, so I just put that down to as well, and I agree with you now. It is mindfulness now that you pointed it out, but for me, it's always been just I got to make sure I appreciate things.
Which I think really ties into what you were saying at the top about how you were thinking a lot of people might listen to this conversation and realize, oh, crap, like these are things I'm already doing. Taking care of self, engaging in mindfulness exercise, it doesn't have to be this big foreign thing. It may just be a case of recognizing that these things that I've always done that have worked for me, these are all part of this puzzle. And maybe if we can fill in the missing pieces, then we can go on to feeling super duper okay.
Super duper okay.
Well, I mean, that's kind of been my experience so far. Is when my therapist first started talking about mindfulness, I'm like, oh, fucking kill me now. I can't listen to this anymore. But when I started really, really paying attention, I realized that these things that were being suggested, a lot of them, yeah, they did sound obvious, but there was the occasional thing that was thrown in there where I realized, like, oh, that actually would be a perfect fit for my existing routine. Maybe I should start incorporating these things. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like I had to learn new skills. It was things I knew how to do that it hadn't occurred to me to start doing.
Right. Well, is it also the case where some things, they're just kind of blah, blah, they're kind of, that's kind of obvious. But even though it's kind of obvious, were we putting it into practice?
Well, it's a great question. And it's one I've had to ponder, right?
Right.
I mean, the fact that you're asking it tells me that you, at the very least in this moment, are pondering it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I've thought about it, but, the reality is, up until talking about it now, it hasn't had a great importance. But now that we're actually talking about it and putting it out there in the ether, maybe I should take what I think a lot more seriously.
Well, I mean, it doesn't hurt.
Right.
I mean, it's all part of this mindfulness is like, I think, helping us build some degree of self-awareness, and not just building that self-awareness, but also doing something with the knowledge that we gain there.
Right. Now, if we don't practice our knowledge, what good is it? We're learning about mindfulness, and you and I have been on this journey for a long time. But we really have to ask ourselves, and for the listeners out there as well, how much of that have I really put into practice? How much have I been talking but not actually doing? Or the other way around?
When I look at the few little notes that we had jotted down as far as like where we wanted the conversation to go, I'm looking at like we had talked to, or we wanted to touch on stress reduction, managing anxiety and depression, enhancing focus and concentration, and improving emotional regulation. What I noticed just now looking at that list is the emotional regulation component. That's really been at the core of our mutual and individual development over ever since we started doing the missionary position podcast way back when. I think the joint effort, the joint mindfulness exercises that we've engaged in have definitely helped our joint ability to regulate emotionally. Like we're not so fiery with each other like we used to be. Of course, we've got our moments.
Well, absolutely. Who doesn't?
But those moments, like they're not like
now they're few and far between.
Right.
Whereas before, moments of calm were few and far between.
So yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's like a whole episode just in that one component alone.
Yeah, maybe someday. Not this day. Yeah.
Which is kind of funny because I think like the last little portion that we wanted to touch on, like under the benefits of mindfulness, was talking about enhancing focus and concentration, and which is kind of funny because when you and I get to talking, more often than not, I find like it's a real example of how to indulge in our symptoms of ADHD. Because we tend to be a little bit all over the place.
Right. But I think we've gotten a lot better. We are more mindful now. We do more anticipate the things that are going on around us and how we handle shit on a general basis.
Right. No, and I think even like the way we're approaching this conversation today, I mean, we've recognized things about ourselves where we tend to get a little bit off track and out of order and lose focus on what we're supposed to be talking about. And we've figured out a way to establish a crutch to keep ourselves on track. So
right.
That's accessible to us. It's certainly going to be accessible to anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Well, and with that being said, back on track here, I need to ask you, what do you find has been a good practice for you to stay in concentration, in working on your mindfulness, like keeping it at the forefront of your mind? Do you have any individual practices that you do to keep yourself there, or does it just happen when you're doing something? Oh, I should be mindful of this.
I've learned to be a little bit more self-indulgent where it is appropriate to do so. Because instead of thinking, okay, well, I gotta, like, for example, instead of thinking, well, I gotta get up and go and do this thing. Like I've been volunteering a lot at a local nonprofit lately, and there's tasks that need to be completed there where if I lose focus on one of these tasks in the midst of doing it, it throws off the other people that are also volunteering. I found that maybe it's better to show up 10 minutes late for a volunteer shift, having gotten a little bit of stuff out of my system. Like I'm a weird person. Sometimes I need to make silly noises. Sometimes there's something that just like really, really simple, like I'm just trying to think of what's an example without giving away too much personal detail. But sometimes I just need to get a little bit of something out of the way. It's like something I'm going to obsess about otherwise. It may not otherwise matter to somebody else. Like, for instance, on my mixing board, if there's dust in between the dials, it's not like I can just wipe it with a cloth. I got to get a Q-tip, swirl around all the different dials, blah, blah, blah. If I've got that nagging thing, like I got to get to this dusting later in my mind, I can't focus on what's in front of me. So right. I'll dust off my mixing board, text everybody I'm supposed to meet and say, look, I'm running 10 minutes late. I got to take care of a thing. And then I can actually focus. I've recognized the distraction. I've neutralized it. Now I can move forward.
Right.
So that's my personal thing. I don't know if you've got a personal thing that's different.
I do approach mindfulness a lot differently. Mine is in the moment. I don't have an agenda. I don't have certain things. I have OCD like tendencies, if not full blown OCD. But they're subconscious. I don't do them I don't think, okay, I got to turn off that light 3 times. That's not one of my OCD things. But when I'm in the moment of doing something, whatever that thing is, blah, it comes into my mind thinking, oh, you know what? Like, I should really be aware of this. I should really make note of this because this will help me later on in the future, or this will stop me from getting stressing over this, or this will stop me from that one little thing that used to piss off Lynn. Well, if I keep doing this, then that will stop that. So that will make things a little bit better too.
Okay.
I don't go into it ahead of time thinking, okay, what am I going to be mindfulness about today? What am I going to keep mindful in my forefront about today? For me, it hits in the moment.
Yeah, and for years that's how I was dealing with things too, was in real time. But part of retraining myself to deal with things differently is I'm learning how to deal more with prevention, so that I'm not getting so tired in the moment. Like one of my medical conditions means that I've really got to be conscious of how I pace myself.
Mhm.
And whereas my brain might be wired in such a way where its tendency is to manage like what you're describing in real time, the physical exhaustion that comes along with that is something I have to figure out how to avoid, and prevention is the way I do that. So not that my way is right and yours is wrong, and just like there's different approaches to the same end. And I think for anybody who's listening, you may have completely different ideas from either of us.
Mhm.
The important thing is that you find what works for you, and not that you try to emulate what works for us.
Right. Now, if you need to practice what works for us to see if it works for you, that's fine. But make sure you find your footing. Find out what works for you.
And yeah, as always, I would be very, very interested to hear if anybody's got stories, like anything related to what we're talking about. If you got different exercises, different approaches that you think would be relevant to the ongoing conversation, certainly feel free to reach out. We might even be interested in having you on the show to have a little bit of a talk about it.
I also wanted to make a really quick note just about, let us know, if you're giving us your opinion or something, let us also know if we can use it on the air.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Well, I actually wanted to find out about like physical benefits. Like, are there things that make being mindfulness, does it make things easier to program for you, like when you're doing your dishes, or any physical attributes like lower blood pressure? Does it help? Like for me, one mindfulness is don't eat a lot of ketchup. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but the acids in ketchup really mess up my arthritis in my hands.
Right.
So I stay away from tomatoes and ketchup or anything tomatoey, tomato sauces, that kind of stuff. Preventative, again, rather than cause and effect. Right? I don't want to deal with my inflammation when it's happening. I want to stop it from happening. Is there anything in that genre that you find has naturally crept up because of you being mindful?
I'm not at the point right now where I can say what the actual benefits are. I'm at the point where I am monitoring and measuring things on the daily to find out what my symptoms are so that I can figure out how to address them. I'm monitoring
Sure.
things like my blood glucose, my protein absorption, my weight, of course, my blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen absorption. Just I'm a walking laboratory these days.
Oh, cool.
So that's something I will follow up with in the future, but I can't answer today.
Mm-hmm. I'm in the same boat. Like I've heard that mindfulness helps you sleep. I heard that mindfulness helps you lose weight, so on and so forth. But for me, neither of those have come into practice yet, as you can see. Or, well, they can't see, but you can. Yeah.
Okay, so for anybody listening, if you thought we were trying to present ourselves as some sort of authorities to the subject, well, that just exposes us as being in the struggle with you. So
Yep.
by no means are we claiming to be experts on the subject.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. We're just fighting through this thing called life, just like everybody else is.
Okay, well, that was a fairly easy category to cover. You don't know and I don't know.
Yep.
Moving along.
So what are some points you want to touch on?
I think that the big one that I already touched on briefly was just the idea of, I really do think that incorporating meditation into our daily lives is super, super important. And it doesn't have to be like this formalized thing where you're like putting up your Buddha statue and lighting the incense and sitting in the lotus position and I do take time throughout my week to do that. Like that's a thing that fits for me, but I don't have to get into a fully immersive meditative state to see the benefits of meditation. Sometimes it's a case of I wake up in the morning and instead of instinctively reaching for my phone or rushing off to make my morning pee, I will lay in bed and just breathe.
And agonize that you have to pee.
Well, I mean, that's all part of it too.
Yep.
But I mean, it's being aware of the sensations in my bbody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Am I too warm? Am I too cold? Am I sweaty? Does it feel like I drooled through the night? It's all these things that I think about while I'm primarily focusing on my breathing. And then once I've breathed myself into a clear headspace, before the panic sets in and I start doing the pee-pee dance, then I'm ready to, hit the ground in kind of a calmer frame of mind. Whereas before I started doing this, I'd start doom scrolling on Facebook right away. I was getting stressed out because there's always some freaking idiot that needs to be responded to. There's always something I don't want to hear or just
don't want to see.
Right. It's not a good way to start the day.
All right.
But focusing on my breathing, putting in my eye drops so my eyes feel comfortable, just like these basic self-care things, that helps. I mean, taking time throughout the day as well, like meditation, it doesn't have to be you can meditate while you're doing other things, because it's not about clearing your mind, it's about organizing your mind, it's about focusing on certain things, and even something like driving your car, that could be a meditative practice. It could clear your mind. I mean, if you're looking at the dotted line flying past your hood, clarity can be gained there. So,
well, for me, it's a calming mindset going for my drives.
I mean, just whatever works for the individual. But I mean, I've learned to recognize the meditative components to a lot of mundane daily tasks, and I realize that I don't have to dedicate special time or throughout the day. It definitely better if I can, but it's not necessary every day.
Fair enough. I think something you touched on earlier is super important, and that's self-care. Again, my opinion from what I've read and what I've seen is that not enough people put enough importance on self-care. While I'm breathing, I'm up, I've had breakfast, now I can go. Why not wake up an extra 15, 20 minutes earlier and allow yourself to stretch out? Allow yourself to put your body in check. Okay, I went to move and I had a little bit of a hip pain there. I'm not going to push through. I'm going to find out, what way did I move? Just something to get your mind off of doing everything else. And focusing on what's going on inside, maybe spending an extra 30 seconds brushing your teeth, or taking a couple extra minutes to wake up and allow yourself to enjoy the warmth that you're in right there, that nice relaxed position that you're feeling right there. Why not give yourself an extra 20 or 30 seconds to enjoy it? And then stretch out. Don't just get up and go to the bathroom, There's a lot of things that we can do for self-care that I think people overlook.
Yeah, fair enough.
And don't give themselves enough time to do.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, because that is super important stuff.
I learned it from you. I used to just get up and go. Well, I mean, get up, shower, brush my teeth, get out of here. Sometimes I was way OCD. So again, this thing about self-help, you also got to be really careful, because I got into an OCD practice where I messed up my teeth. I was brushing my teeth 18 times a day, thinking I was taking care of myself properly. And I wore the enamel off my teeth, and now my teeth are corroded. So there's a fine line on both ends of that, taking care of yourself.
Right.
And again, mindfulness. So my next question is, and where do we take all this to? Like, what do you think we want to see? Like, what would be a good result from everything we've talked about today? Like, I know we're still working through our stuff. I know we're still on our way, but if you had the proper situation presented to you, what do you think a good outcome or a good finalization of what we're talking about today would be?
This is going to sound like a really, really douchey, vague non-answer, but it's an honest one. I just want to keep on feeling better tomorrow than I did today, like forward momentum.
Why is that douchey?
Well, just I feel like maybe you were asking for something specific, but I mean, I can't offer a specific. It's not like I've got a finite goal. Just in a general sense, I want to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to there's no end goal for me. I always want to feel better today than I did the day before.
I think that's a personal I personally think that is an amazing conclusion, just to make yourself feel better and be better for tomorrow. That's
okay.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. That's anything better than I had in my head. Yeah.
Okay, well, then I don't know whether or not it's appropriate to ask the same question back to you or not.
What I thought of was a good conclusion is to put yourself in somebody else's shoes let me rephrase that. Put yourself into a different pair of your own shoes and take a look at, what do I want to be? I'm not necessarily thinking tomorrow. I'm thinking like long term, like a year out, 2 years out. Where do I want to see my end result? But I think that mixed with a component of what you just said would be the ultimate. Make an end goal, make a long-term goal, not an end goal, a long-term goal, because once you reach that, it doesn't mean you have to stop and you shoot for something different. But do it by making sure you're better tomorrow than you were today.
Yeah, it's more like a lifestyle shift than a task to complete.
And an awareness journey. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so to wrap things up then, I mean, any closing thoughts?
When you're in the mindset of being mindful, look at the people around you and take into account that you do honestly need to be mindful for them as well, because it'll make your life situation better. It'll make their life situation better, which overall makes it easier for you to do your mindfulness with people understanding that, expecting them to.
Fair enough.
Be better for yourself, but also be better for somebody else.
No, I like that. Okay, well, as always, I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to maybe do a little bit of a different call to action this week. I mean, normally I like to invite everybody to share their thoughts on either what we talked about today or anything else we've talked about in the past, with us by reaching out via email, which of course you're welcome to do in thebloodpod@gmail.com. But I'd also like to invite you to share your experiences or your thoughts on mindfulness with the people that are close to you. Have some dialogue. Suss things out with each other. See what you're already doing, maybe what you need to do. Find out how you can benefit, maybe engaging in group mindfulness like Jason and I have done with each other. It's hugely beneficial, powerful, it definitely feels good. Mm-hmm. And
don't go in with expectations, come up with results.
Exactly. So yeah, do that. That's your homework. And until next week, my friends, much love.